He hadn't been back to his hometown for more than 20 years. The streets looked smaller now, as if the town itself had shrunk while he was away chasing success in the city. The familiar shops and houses were still there, though many looked worn and faded, carrying the weight of time. He could feel a strange mix of excitement and unease as he drove slowly through the streets, remembering the days when he would run through these roads as a young boy, free and full of dreams. His heart pounded a little faster as he realized how long it had been since he last walked these paths. The scent of the old bakery, the sound of children playing in the distance, and the faint laughter of people passing by brought memories flooding back, memories that he had buried under layers of work, ambition, and city life. Finally, he turned onto the narrow lane where his childhood home stood. At first glance, the house looked almost abandoned. Its paint was peeling, windows were dusty, and the garden was overgrown with weeds. The swing in the yard was still there, swinging slightly in the wind, as if waiting for him. He parked his car and stepped out, feeling the crunch of gravel under his shoes. Each step toward the house brought a wave of memories. Playing hide and seek with neighborhood kids, the sound of his mother calling him for dinner, his father's stern yet loving voice reminding him to study hard. He could see the old oak tree in the front yard, its branches thick and strong, just like he remembered, yet somehow smaller now. Walking up the cracked pathway, he paused for a moment, staring at the front door. It had been years since he last touched it, yet he remembered the way the wooden handle felt under his hand, worn smooth from years of use. He pushed the door open slowly, and the familiar creak echoed through the empty house. It smelled of dust, old wood, and a faint trace of his mother's perfume. The walls, once bright with colors and family photos, were now dull and bare, yet every corner seemed to whisper stories from the past. He walked through the living room, tracing his fingers over the faded patterns on the carpet. Memories of family gatherings, birthday parties, and quiet evenings spent reading came rushing back. In the kitchen, he stopped at the old table where his family used to eat together. He could almost hear the clatter of dishes and the laughter of his younger self. He opened the drawers, half expecting to find something left behind, maybe a toy, a notebook, or a photograph, something that would connect him instantly to the past, but the drawers were empty, leaving him with only memories. His gaze moved to the staircase leading to the bedrooms upstairs. He remembered racing up and down those steps as a boy, laughing with his siblings, feeling the joy of childhood that now seemed so distant. The silence of the house contrasted sharply with the noisy chaos of his memories, making the emptiness feel even heavier. He stepped outside into the backyard, where the garden had grown wild. The flowers his mother had planted were almost gone, replaced by weeds and grass taller than he remembered. Yet, despite the neglect, the backyard still held a charm, a quiet beauty that reminded him of simpler times. He walked slowly, touching the bark of the old oak tree, imagining the countless hours he had spent sitting under it, reading, daydreaming, or just staring at the sky. The memories were bittersweet, bringing both joy and a pang of regret for the years lost chasing wealth and success. As he stood there, looking at the house and the yard, he realized how much had changed. Not just the house, but himself. He had become someone different, someone who had forgotten the simple pleasures of life. The sight of the deserted home made him question his choices, the sacrifices he had made, and the family moments he had missed. For the first time in years, he felt a longing to reconnect with the past, to remember who he truly was before the world of business and wealth had consumed him. And in that moment, standing in front of the house he had once called home, he knew that this visit would be more than just a trip down memory lane. It would be the beginning of something unexpected, something that might change him forever. Even as he turned to look at the town once more, he noticed small details he had forgotten: the cracked sidewalk where he had learned to ride his bike, the corner store where he had bought candy with his pocket money, the old park bench where he had shared secrets with his childhood friends. Every detail reminded him of a life that was simple but full of warmth, and he realized that, despite all his wealth and success, there were treasures in life that money could never buy, treasures he had almost forgotten. He took a deep breath, feeling the cool breeze brush against his face, and whispered to himself, almost as if promising the boy he once was, "I'm here now." The deserted old house wasn't just a building, it was a mirror reflecting the life he had lived, the choices he had made, and the memories that still defined him. Standing there, he felt both the weight of the past and a spark of hope for what he might discover next. The billionaire had not planned to stay long. His mind was set on a single goal: demolish the old house and sell the land. The idea of tearing down the crumbling walls seemed practical, efficient, even necessary. After all, the house was old, neglected, and a reminder of a past he had left behind. Yet, as he stood at the entrance, he realized something unexpected: hesitation, a pause he had not anticipated. The house, silent and dusty, seemed to be holding its breath, as if waiting for him to decide. He walked slowly through the empty hallways, his footsteps echoing against the faded wallpaper and broken floorboards. Each room told a story, even in its silence. He remembered the living room, where his family had gathered every evening, the laughter of his siblings bouncing off the walls, the aroma of his mother's cooking filling the air. The kitchen, though now barren, still held memories of late-night snacks and hurried breakfasts before school. Every corner seemed alive with the past, whispering to him, calling him to slow down and notice. He reached the main bedroom, the room where he had grown up dreaming of the future. The bed was gone, the furniture replaced by dust and shadows, yet the sunlight streaming through the cracked window illuminated the scratches on the wooden floor, marks left by years of his childhood adventures. He knelt down, tracing a long scratch that ran across the floor, remembering the day he had fallen while trying to build a small ramp for his toy car. A small laugh escaped him, and for a moment, the millionaire inside him melted away, leaving only the boy he once was. Still, practicality returned with a firm nudge, reminding him of the demolition team waiting outside. He had spent years building a life of precision, efficiency, and control, and yet here, in a house frozen in time, he felt powerless. The house seemed to have its own will, forcing him to pause, to reflect, to remember. He moved to the attic, a space he had always avoided as a child, thinking it was dusty and boring. But now, as he climbed the old wooden stairs, he felt a strange pull, a curiosity he could not explain. The attic was dark, filled with old boxes stacked haphazardly. Each one seemed to carry secrets of a life he had almost forgotten. He lifted a small box, brushing away layers of dust, and opened it. His eyes widened as he found old letters, photographs, and a few personal items that belonged to his family. The letters were addressed to him, written by his mother, her handwriting delicate and familiar, full of love and advice. As he read, he felt a rush of emotion, a mix of joy, regret, and longing. These letters reminded him of a time when life was simple, when happiness did not depend on wealth. He continued sifting through the boxes, discovering trinkets and memories that brought the past alive: a worn-out baseball glove, his father's old watch, a photo of his siblings and him smiling at a family picnic. Each item pulled him deeper into memories he had suppressed, memories of laughter, warmth, and the kind of love that no money could buy. He realized, with a sudden clarity, that demolishing this house was not just about tearing down walls, it was about erasing a part of his own life. Outside, the demolition team grew impatient, their engine starting, the sound of machinery reaching his ears. But inside, he was no longer thinking about deadlines, contracts, or profits. He was thinking about the stories the walls held, the life that had once filled this empty shell. A part of him wanted to run, to escape back to the city, back to the life of power and control he had built. Yet, another part of him, the part that had always longed for connection, for roots, refused to leave. He finally stood in the center of the attic, surrounded by decades of memories, feeling a strange peace settle over him. The house was more than wood and bricks. It was a reflection of his past, of who he had been, and perhaps, a guide to who he could become. For the first time in years, he did not feel the urge to rush, to decide, to control. Instead, he felt the need to listen, to observe, to let the house tell him its story. As he descended the attic stairs slowly, he realized that this trip, which had begun as a simple act of demolition, had become a journey of rediscovery. The billionaire, so used to solving problems with money and authority, had encountered something no wealth could touch: his own history, his own emotions, and the fragile, irreplaceable beauty of memory. Standing back in the empty hallways, he made a silent promise to himself. Even though he didn't yet know how it would unfold, he would honor the past, listen to the stories hidden within the walls, and let the house guide him to a choice far more meaningful than demolition. As the billionaire carefully walked through the attic, dust motes danced in the thin shafts of sunlight streaming through the cracked windows. Each box he opened seemed to whisper a story of the past, but one small, worn-out box caught his eye, different from the rest. Its edges were frayed, the lid fragile and slightly torn, as if it had been opened many times before. He knelt down, gently lifting the lid, and inside, among some old trinkets and faded photographs, was a letter addressed to him. In delicate, familiar handwriting. His heart skipped a beat. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was his mother's, written years before her passing. He hesitated, almost afraid to read it, fearing the flood of emotions it might bring, but curiosity and longing won over. Carefully, he unfolded the paper, the scent of aged paper carrying memories he had long forgotten. The letter began with simple words of love and pride, yet as he read further, the words became personal, intimate, and full of wisdom. It spoke of dreams, of choices, of the importance of family, and of the legacy of their home. Tears welled in his eyes as he realized the depth of her words. The letter mentioned moments he barely remembered, his first bicycle, the day he lost his favorite toy, and how proud she was when he learned to read by himself. Each sentence seemed to speak directly to him, bridging the gap of years spent apart from his family and from the small town that had shaped him. His mind drifted to his childhood, to the laughter of his siblings, the warm dinners, and the quiet evenings spent telling stories by the fireplace. He felt a connection that had been missing for decades, a reminder of who he truly was before wealth and ambition had taken over. But the letter was more than just memories. It carried a secret he had never known, a hidden part of his family's life. Tucked carefully between the lines, she spoke of a small inheritance, a piece of land purchased years ago, meant to stay in the family, untouched and preserved for him, something she had hoped he would discover when the time was right. The realization hit him like a wave, startling and thrilling all at once. It wasn't just about money, it was a symbol of love, foresight, and faith in him. He leaned back against the attic wall, letting the weight of the discovery sink in. For so many years, he had chased wealth, power, and success, thinking that they would define him, but here, in this dusty attic, holding a letter written decades ago, he realized that true wealth had always been something else, something deeper, tied to family, memories, and the love that had shaped him. The letter reminded him that no amount of money could ever replace what he had left behind in pursuit of his dreams. Feeling a sudden need to see more, he opened other boxes, uncovering more photographs and mementos. Each photograph told a story: birthday parties with friends and neighbors, family holidays at the lake, small acts of kindness from people he had long forgotten. He began to piece together a history not written in books or contracts, but in moments, gestures, and love. These were the treasures that mattered, hidden in plain sight, waiting for him to notice. He realized that the deserted house was more than just a structure. It was a keeper of memories, a witness to life's most precious moments, and now, with the letter in hand, he felt a responsibility he hadn't anticipated, a desire to honor the past rather than erase it. As he read and reread the letter, he noticed a final line, almost like a whisper from beyond: remember, it's not the walls that make the home, but the love and memories that live inside it. In that instant, the billionaire understood that demolishing the house was no longer an option, not yet, at least, not when it still held so much meaning, so many stories, and a part of himself he had almost forgotten. He sat in the attic for a long time, the letter clutched to his chest, feeling a sense of peace, awe, and purpose that he hadn't felt in decades. As the sun began to set outside, casting golden light through the dusty windows, he stood slowly, the letter still in his hand. He knew that what he had found was only the beginning, a doorway to understanding his past, his family, and perhaps even his future. For the first time, the deserted house didn't feel empty, it felt alive, alive with stories waiting to be told. After the letter, the billionaire felt a strange energy in the house, as if it were urging him to explore further. He carefully set the letter aside and turned his attention to a corner of the attic he hadn't noticed before. There, half hidden beneath a pile of old blankets, was a thick, worn photo album, its leather cover cracked and softened by years of handling. He picked it up with reverence, sensing that this album might hold more than just images, it could hold the essence of his childhood. He opened the album slowly, and the first photograph made him pause. A young boy, himself, stood in front of the very house he now planned to demolish, smiling widely, cheeks flushed with excitement. The next photo showed him and his siblings playing in the garden, their faces dirty with mud, laughter frozen in time. Each page he turned revealed moments he had almost forgotten: birthday parties with neighbors, small victories like learning to ride a bicycle without falling, quiet evenings reading stories by candlelight, and the unmistakable presence of his parents, always watching, always loving. He traced his finger over the photographs, almost feeling the warmth of those days. The memories weren't just images, they were emotions, vivid and alive. He remembered the smell of the kitchen when his mother baked bread, the sound of his father whistling while working in the yard, the sun streaming through the windows during lazy Sunday afternoons. Every photo told a story, and with each turn of the page, he felt the weight of the life he had left behind. One photograph, in particular, caught his attention. A group of children stood near the oak tree in the backyard, holding hands in a circle, their faces full of pure joy. He realized he could almost hear their laughter again, echoing across time. He thought about how busy he had become in the city, how he had chased wealth and power while forgetting these small, irreplaceable moments. The photo album was not just a collection of memories, it was a reminder of what truly mattered, the foundation upon which his life had been built. As he flipped through more pages, he found a series of letters tucked between them, notes written by his siblings and parents, some playful, some heartfelt. They spoke of shared dreams, encouragement, little secrets, and hopes for the future. He smiled and felt a pang of longing, realizing how much he had missed by focusing only on business and ambition. The letters, combined with the photographs, created a vivid picture of his family's love and unity, something that money and success could never replicate. He spent hours absorbed in the album, losing track of time. The attic, once dusty and quiet, felt alive with the presence of his family, of laughter, of lessons learned. Each photograph reminded him of the sacrifices his parents had made, the small joys they had cherished, and the guidance they had given him. He understood, in a way he hadn't before, that the house was a vessel carrying these moments, safeguarding them through the years, waiting for him to recognize their value. By the time he closed the album, the billionaire felt a transformation within himself, a softening of the heart that had been hardened by years of ambition. The deserted old house was no longer just an old building to be torn down, it was a living memory, a testament to the life he had lived and the people who had shaped him. He realized that demolishing it would not only destroy the structure but also erase the stories, the emotions, and the love that had filled its walls. He stood up and looked around the attic one last time, feeling a connection deeper than he had expected. The sunlight filtering through the windows seemed warmer, the shadows softer, as if the house itself acknowledged his understanding. For the first time, he thought about restoration instead of demolition, preservation instead of destruction. The photo album had reminded him of the power of memory, of the importance of roots, and of the invisible threads that tied him to the past. As he descended the attic stairs, carrying the photo album close to his chest, he knew that the story of this house was far from over. The letters, photographs, and memories had awakened something within him, a desire to honor the past and protect it. The deserted old house had given him more than nostalgia, it had given him clarity, purpose, and a renewed appreciation for the life that had led him to this very moment. And with that understanding, he knew that whatever he decided to do next would not just affect the building, but the legacy of his family, the story of his own life, and the treasures of memory that no demolition could ever destroy. As he carefully closed the photo album and set it aside, a sudden knock at the front door startled him. The sound echoed through the empty house, sharp and unexpected. He hesitated for a moment, surprised. Visitors were rare in this deserted place, and he had not expected anyone at all. Slowly, he walked to the door and opened it, and standing there was an elderly man, leaning slightly on a cane. His clothes were simple, worn, yet neat, and his eyes sparkled with recognition. "Excuse me," the man said softly, "I heard the demolition was about to start. I used to live next door. Thought I'd come and see if someone still cared about this house." The billionaire blinked, unsure how to respond. His first instinct was to maintain the distance he had carried all these years, but something about the man felt familiar, almost comforting. I'm the owner," he finally said, his voice quiet, uncertain. "I was thinking of demolishing it." The man smiled, a warm, knowing smile. "Ah, I thought so. But before you do, maybe I should tell you a few things about the family that lived here, and what this house meant to the people around it." He stepped inside, carefully navigating the uneven floorboards, and the billionaire led him to the living room, where dust and sunlight mixed in golden rays. As they sat down, the man began to speak, and the billionaire listened intently. surprised at how much he wanted to hear. "Your parents were remarkable people," the neighbor said. "Quiet, kind, and always thinking of others. I remember the time your father helped me repair my roof during a storm, and how your mother would bring warm bread to the neighbors during winter. You didn't see it as a child, but everyone in this town remembers them fondly." The billionaire's chest tightened as he pictured his parents' faces, their sacrifices, and their quiet acts of love. Many of these memories had been lost in the rush of his own life, and yet, here they were, returning to him in vivid detail. The neighbor continued, "And you, even as a boy, you were curious, bright, and full of life. You helped clean up after the harvest festivals, played with the other children, and sometimes even mediated little arguments among kids in the neighborhood. You were part of the town, whether you knew it or not." The billionaire felt a lump in his throat, realizing how little he had remembered, how much time had passed without appreciating the depth of his family's impact on the community. He led the man into the backyard, and together they walked among the overgrown grass and weeds, the old oak tree casting long shadows in the late afternoon sun. The neighbor gestured toward it. "I remember all of you kids playing under this tree. Many of us would come here to rest after working in the fields. This house wasn't just your home, it was part of all our lives. It taught us about love, community, and resilience." The billionaire's eyes scanned the garden, seeing it now not as a neglected space, but as a living memory of laughter, joy, and connection. The man paused and looked at him seriously. "Before you tear it down, remember that a house is more than bricks and timber. It carries stories, memories, and lessons. Your family's legacy isn't just in the city you built, it's here, in every corner of this house, in the hearts of people who loved them and were loved by them." The billionaire felt a shift within himself, a subtle yet undeniable change. Something in him softened, a long-forgotten part of his heart waking up. They returned to the living room, and the billionaire sat in silence, thinking about the photos, the letters, and now, the neighbor's stories. He realized that this house was more than a building, it was a repository of love, a symbol of community, and a bridge to his past. The neighbor smiled gently and said, "Sometimes, we need to be reminded that what seems small or old can be more valuable than anything money can buy." And with that, he left, leaving behind a silence filled not with emptiness, but with meaning. The billionaire stood by the window, watching the man walk away, his cane tapping softly against the gravel. He turned back to the house, truly seeing it for the first time in decades. The walls, though cracked, held warmth. The garden, though overgrown, held life. The memories, though buried, were alive, whispering to him, guiding him, asking him to honor them. He realized that the choice was no longer about demolition. It was about preserving, understanding, and cherishing. For the first time since he arrived, he felt clarity and purpose. The deserted house was not just a relic of the past, it was a teacher, a keeper of stories, and a reminder of what truly mattered. And standing there, with the golden light of the afternoon bathing the room, he understood that his next steps would be guided not by ambition or wealth, but by love, memory, and the legacy of those who had come before him. After the neighbor left, the billionaire felt a quiet determination rising inside him. He carried the photo album and the letters back into the attic, the sunlight casting long shadows across the dusty floor. The attic no longer felt empty, it felt alive, filled with echoes of laughter, whispered secrets, and the warmth of his family's love. He opened the letter from his mother once more, reading it carefully, line by line, hoping to find clues he might have missed. As he reached the last pages, a small folded piece of paper slipped from between them, almost as if it had been waiting for him to notice. He unfolded it and his eyes widened, scanning the words written in his mother's delicate handwriting. The letter revealed a secret he had never known, a piece of land, purchased decades ago, quietly kept within the family, meant to be preserved for him, a small inheritance, yes, but more importantly, a symbol of foresight, care, and love. The billionaire sank into a nearby chair, letting the revelation sink in. It wasn't money that mattered. It was the story behind it, the intention, the love that had prompted his mother to safeguard something tangible for him, something that connected him to his roots. His heart swelled with emotion as he pictured his mother, quietly planning for a future she knew he might one day need, even if he had strayed far from the values she held dear. He went outside to the backyard, the old oak tree towering above him, its branches swaying gently in the wind. Memories of his parents, his siblings, and his childhood neighbors rushed back in waves. He realized that this small inheritance was more than land. It was a piece of his family's legacy, a reminder of their foresight, and an invitation for him to reconnect with his past, the house, the letters, the photographs. And now this secret, all seemed to align, pushing him toward a choice far more meaningful than demolition. For hours, he walked through the rooms, imagining how the house had been filled with life, love, and laughter. Each creak in the floorboards, each faded mark on the wall, spoke of the care, struggle, and joy his family had poured into this place. He understood now that the inheritance wasn't just about ownership, it was about preservation, about valuing what had been built not with money, but with effort, emotion, and devotion. He sat on the front porch steps, the letter in his hand, and reflected on how much he had chased wealth and status, thinking those were the measures of success. Yet, here, standing in a house that had witnessed decades of life, he realized that true wealth had always been elsewhere, in memories, relationships, and the small, intentional acts of love that shaped people. He felt a shift within him, a clarity that washed away the obsession with demolition. The billionaire stood up, determined. He would honor the wishes of his mother, respect the history of the house, and embrace the inheritance not just as property, but as a responsibility. He walked through the overgrown garden, imagining how it could be restored, how the house could be preserved to tell the story of his family, the town, and the generations that came before him. The sense of purpose that had eluded him in the city now filled him completely, vibrant and undeniable. That evening, he sat by the fireplace, the letter and photographs surrounding him. The discovery of the hidden land, the stories from the neighbor, and the memories from his childhood converged into one realization. This house and this inheritance were more than material things. They were a chance to reconnect with his roots, to honor his family, and to leave behind something meaningful, not just for himself, but for everyone who had been part of this story. For the first time in decades, the billionaire felt at peace. He knew what he had to do, and it was no longer about demolition or profit. It was about restoration, preservation, and a deeper understanding of the legacy his family had entrusted to him. And as he looked out at the overgrown yard and the empty rooms, he felt a quiet promise form in his heart, a promise to protect, cherish, and bring life back to the house that had shaped him, the house that had finally reminded him of who he truly was. The next morning, the billionaire awoke with a sense of clarity he hadn't felt in years. The letter, the photographs, the neighbors' stories, and the hidden inheritance had stirred something deep inside him, a longing not for wealth or power, but for meaning. He walked through the house again, each step deliberate, noticing details he had overlooked before, the cracks in the walls, the faded curtains, the sunbeam falling just so across the wooden floor. For the first time, he saw the house not as a building to demolish, but as a living memory, a vessel of life waiting to be restored. He stood in the backyard, surveying the overgrown garden and the neglected oak tree. The weeds had taken over, but he imagined the garden blooming again, children playing, neighbors gathering, and sunlight dancing through the leaves. He thought about how his parents had cared for this space, how every corner held a story, a memory, a lesson, and he realized that the house, the land, and even the old tree were more than possessions. They were a legacy, one that deserved respect, preservation, and love. With determination, he began making plans. First, he would restore the house to its former charm, keeping the original structure wherever possible, preserving the rooms, the floors, the walls that held decades of memory. He wanted it to be a place where his family's story could be remembered, where the town could feel the history that had been nurtured there. Next, he thought of the garden, how it could become a space for the community. A place where children could play, neighbors could gather, and memories could continue to be made. His mind buzzed with possibilities, not for profit, but for life, connection, and heritage. He called his assistants, not to organize demolition, but to help him restore the house. He instructed them carefully, emphasizing that the goal was preservation, that every corner held value beyond money, every crack, every faded photograph, every worn wooden step was part of the story, and he wanted it honored. They listened, surprised by the sudden shift, but inspired by his vision. They began coordinating carpenters, painters, gardeners, and historians, each one carefully documenting and restoring the house. The project became not just a renovation, but a mission to revive history, love, and memory. As the days passed, he worked alongside the team, not out of necessity, but from a sense of personal responsibility. He scrubbed floors, painted walls, and carefully placed photographs and letters back in their rightful places. He walked through each room, imagining laughter and family gatherings filling the space once more. Every action felt like a step toward healing, both for the house and for himself. He realized that restoring the home was also restoring a part of his own soul, the part that had been buried under ambition, stress, and years of chasing wealth. He invited the neighbor back, wanting to show him the plans, and together they walked through the rooms. The elderly man smiled, shaking his head with quiet approval. "This is more than a house now. You're bringing back the heart of this community, just like your parents did," he said, and the billionaire nodded, feeling the weight and the beauty of the responsibility he had taken on. By the end of the week, the vision began to take shape. The garden started to bloom, the windows sparkled in the sunlight, and the rooms felt warm again, not just from cleanliness, but from intention. The house, once silent and empty, was alive with purpose, carrying the past forward into the present. He walked through it alone one evening, the golden light of sunset falling through the windows, and realized he had never felt more connected to his life, his family, and his history. The billionaire understood something profound. Restoration was not just about fixing walls or painting rooms, it was about honoring what came before, preserving memories, and creating space for the future. He smiled softly, imagining generations yet to come, children running through the garden, families laughing in the rooms, and the house standing as a testament to love, resilience, and legacy. And in that moment, he knew that the house, once deserted and forgotten, had transformed him as much as he was transforming it. He felt gratitude for the journey, for the letters, the photos, the neighbor's words, and the hidden inheritance that had guided him. The decision was no longer about demolition, no longer about profit or efficiency. It was about connection, memory, and the enduring power of home. For the first time, he truly understood that wealth was not measured in money or assets, but in love, legacy, and the stories that live on long after walls are built and bricks are laid. And as he stood in the middle of the restored house, feeling the quiet hum of life returning, he whispered to himself, "This is home, and it always has been." The day finally came when the restoration of the house was complete, and the billionaire stood at the threshold, taking in the sight before him. The once deserted home now radiated warmth and life, the paint refreshed yet gentle, the windows sparkling, the garden blooming with flowers carefully replanted. The old oak tree in the backyard stretched its branches proudly, casting dappled light across the lawn. As he stepped onto the porch, he could almost hear the echoes of laughter and footsteps from the past mingling with the present. He had invited the neighbor and a few townspeople to witness the reopening of the house, not as a museum of wealth, but as a tribute to memories, community, and family. The guests arrived slowly, some walking with curiosity, others with a sense of nostalgia. All of them were greeted by the sight of the garden alive again, benches restored, and paths cleared, a space ready for people to gather once more. The air was filled with a sense of anticipation, quiet excitement, and respect. As the first visitors stepped inside, they paused in the living room, eyes widening at the careful restoration. The walls bore photographs of past generations, letters framed with care, and small keepsakes that told the story of the family who had lived there. The billionaire guided them through the rooms, sharing stories of his childhood, the letters from his mother, and the discoveries he had made in the attic. His voice carried not pride, but reverence, a deep respect for the life that had been nurtured here. Outside, children ran through the garden, their laughter echoing against the restored walls. Some older residents sat on benches, recalling memories of their own youth, while others marveled at how a neglected, abandoned house could be transformed into a space full of life again. The billionaire watched quietly, a gentle smile on his face, feeling the invisible threads of history connecting him, his family, and the community. He walked to the backyard, standing beneath the oak tree, and thought of the letters, the hidden inheritance, and the photo album that had guided him to this moment. He realized that the house had taught him more than he could have imagined. It had taught him about love, patience, humility, and the true meaning of legacy. The wealth he had spent his life chasing seemed distant and insignificant compared to the richness of memory, connection, and history he now embraced. The neighbor approached, leaning on his cane, and nodded with approval. "You've done more than restore a house," he said softly. "You've restored the heart of this town, the memory of a family, and given life back to something that mattered more than anything money could buy. The billionaire felt a lump in his throat, realizing that this project had changed him as much as it had changed the house. He walked through the house one last time alone, stopping in each room to remember the moments that had shaped his life. The attic, now cleaned and organized, held the letters and photographs safely. The living room displayed mementos of birthdays, laughter, and quiet evenings. The garden outside promised future memories yet to be made. He touched the walls, imagining the stories they had witnessed and the love they had absorbed, feeling a sense of gratitude unlike anything he had known. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the house, the billionaire stood on the porch and looked out over the yard, feeling a sense of peace and fulfillment. The journey that began with a plan to demolish had transformed into a journey of rediscovery, connection, and preservation. He understood that true wealth wasn't in money, cars, or skyscrapers. It was in the memories we keep, the love we share, and the legacy we leave behind. In that moment, he whispered to himself, almost as a promise, "I will honor this, always." And as the townspeople lingered, sharing stories and laughter, and children played freely in the garden, the billionaire realized he was no longer just a visitor in this house. He was a part of its ongoing story, a caretaker of its legacy, and a witness to the enduring power of family, community, and memory. For the first time in decades, he felt truly at home, and he knew that this house, once abandoned and forgotten, would continue to inspire, connect, and remind everyone who entered of the love, hope, and life that had always been its true foundation.